work is not the place you go to find your calling. It's the place you go to express it. So you're expressing who you are and that purpose that God's given you in your work, rather than saying, hey, I need work. You're actually hoping that work can fulfill something deep inside you. If you're looking at it the other way around, which is kind of the antithesis of the Christian message. It would actually be that there's nothing out there that can fulfill you, make you whole, complete who you're supposed to be, in whatever language you use for that. God says, I have to do that.
Today we're joined by someone whose work challenges how we think about career and calling. Ross Chapman is the CEO of the Denver Institute for Faith and Work. I'm excited to welcome Ross to the show. All right. So I wanted to chat to you about this broad concept of calling and career. Do you want to introduce yourself real quick and then we can go from there?
Yeah, my name's Ross Chapman. I'm currently serving as the CEO at Denver Institute for Faith and Work. And I love to explore the conversation of how does my everyday work connect with my Christian faith. And that actually gets practical in your everyday decisions and the way that you think about what you're doing every day and the purpose that it has and the opportunities you have to contribute to common good so it's just an opportunity to help people kind of go, hey, I think there's a different vision for work out there than we might do in society and then I might even hear at church. So we really want people to wrestle with that. It's really become a passion for me because of just my background in trying to help churches work together for the good of the city. I really decided like, man, that would be awesome to see, but wouldn't it be even better to see people's everyday work connecting to some of those needs or dreams in the city in a really practical way, and not just leaving it up to church leaders or nonprofit leaders or even government leaders to solve those things, but to see people's everyday work as an opportunity for that.
So I hear one thing already is like this dichotomy or supposed dichotomy between how most of us spend most of our time, which is working, and then like sort of sacred things, right? Like whether that's church or something like that. So this whole concept of calling, is that an inherently Christian or inherently spiritual, faith-driven concept? Or talk to me about that.
Yeah, well, that's a good question. I would say it's a human concept. I think, coming from my faith perspective, it's wired into human beings to want to have a sense of what am I here for? What is my destiny? What is my purpose? And so we are entering the world with those kinds of questions on our mind already. And even if we're not thinking about them intentionally, at some point society makes us ask those questions. What kind of worker do I want to be? What am I going to study? What are my opportunities going to be for survival, whether that's a paycheck or something else? You start to get this opportunity then to go, am I good at this? Does that matter for something? Am I doing more than just showing up at work and getting my paycheck? You could have that mentality over time. That's going to be hard to actually live out because we need something deeper that gives us a reason for getting up and participating in the world. So I think calling is a human idea, and I think there certainly is a Christian vision for what calling looks like in the communities. And sometimes those things get conflated with sort of society's view of calling and how we use it in everyday language, like, it's not my calling, to somebody deciding I'm going to choose a career because I think it's my calling. I think Scripture speaks a little differently than that about calling.
Yeah, so that's one area where I wanted to kind of dig in. Denver Institute for Faith and Work, you should be an expert on this, right?
Well, we at least think about it a lot. Expert's a big word.
Well, all right, we'll go with that. You think about it more than most. So, let's go with it. You talk about the different ways that different people use the word calling or how they relate to that concept. on net, do you think it has been like just the word itself and how it gets used sort of popularly? Do you think it's been a healthy or productive concept, or is there some fundamental misunderstanding that has made the discussion around it actually be destructive rather than productive?
Wow, Ian, that is a really good question. Man, I have to think about that. I like the question because I do think the concept and the way that it's used, um, because I think it's a human thing, I think it has been productive in one sense and wholly unproductive in other ways. So, in the sense that it's been productive, is that it does get people, I think, thinking about deeper questions. And I think we live in a time where staying with the questions longer is not the cool thing to do. It is not the easiest thing to do because our attention is uh, constantly being, distracted by other things, our feeds, our phones, our jobs, our busyness, whatever it is. And so wrestling with this idea of calling is actually a good way to pause and go, what do I think I'm called to do or be? I think that's probably a net positive on society. I think it then breaks down because, uh, especially in the work world, it's really easy to say, I don't like this job. I'm not good at it. It's not my calling. Therefore, I should do something else. I think like I grew up in church. I remember thinking people who had a calling, I somehow picked up the message that they had like a special sort of role to play, and they somehow specially knew that they had been asked to do this job by God. So that felt like, well, they get a special job and I don't, or they're hearing from him and I'm not. And I think that can be destructive. And I think it's destructive because there really isn't. It, Scripture doesn't speak about calling that way. When God made humanity, He gave them work to do, asked asked them to participate with them in bringing more flourishing, fullness, completeness to what He had made. I actually think that is a very important aspect of calling that you could then express in whatever your occupation is, whatever your role in life is. Like I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a worker, I'm a neighbor, I'm also a consumer, hopefully a producer of things. Those are all avenues that I have to express this opportunity to participate with things that God wants done in the world. And I like to think of it as like even a strategic conditioning. Like if He's all knowing and all wise and all good, and He has me, doing this job for a season, it may or may not align with my gifts perfectly. It may or may not be as enjoyable as I hope all the time. But it's still, no matter what, an opportunity to join in this thing that I think He's set out for me to do. So that's a freeing way to think about calling, in my opinion, rather than thinking I have to go find the exact thing that I was made for. Parallel would be: is there only one person in the world that you should marry? Like that you got to go find this one person out of 8 billion because there's only one for you. And you know what? If you never find them, sorry, you're out of luck. Versus, like, actually, I think it's about a commitment. It's about a desire and a willingness to extend love over and over repeatedly, which you want to find a good fit person that you're willing to care for and love and you share things in common with, and you have some things maybe not in common with, and you eventually decide, look, I'm committed. I'm going to marry this person. There's probably lots of people in the world that you could end up marrying and having a very healthy, satisfying, fulfilling marriage rather than thinking of it as one. So when we translate calling as like there's just one role out there, I think it puts us in a position of failure. Let's say I decided in college that I should study management, and I thought for sure I would go and be a person who ends up leading a company sometime, or who's going to go and, start his own company. But 6 months into my first job in management training at this large corporation, your supervisor says, "Hey, you know what? I really don't think you're cut out for this." Well, man, I just lost my entire sense of calling, which feels like I've lost some huge part of who I am because I don't fit this job. And I think that's a bad place to be. And I think that's set you up for failure. So that's where I would say calling could break that.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much there. It's a huge question, but I think I want to zoom in on that piece of like, there's an aspect in which those two, productive or unproductive, are both how somebody in their story or their context relates to the concept of calling, right? So there's something about how they were brought up or whatever, where it can be unproductive if it becomes the obstacle to going out and doing the work, right? Because you're waiting for that perfect anointing or calling. On the other hand, we do want to be more fully employed and to be making more of an impact. I mean, those are good things. And if you've started out with zero sense of calling, you start to reflect on that, it's probably productive in that sense. So what I'm hearing is an undertone of identity in the calling, or not necessarily in the calling, but there's an aspect of identity in relation with that sense of calling, which I think probably can both be healthy or unhealthy, depending on how that gets worked out. But to what extent, when you're talking about those different situations and how people relate to the sense of calling, to what extent does it overlap, our sense of calling overlap with our sense of identity or our relationship to self?
Yeah, I would say calling is identity plus purpose. So I would come from the perspective that I've been given an identity as a person who is adopted into God's family through Jesus Christ. When that happens, that is my primary and most important identity that cannot be changed, no matter my circumstance. And I then also am willing to then take on the family responsibilities, which I think God is really clear that He has a purpose in restoring all things, making all that's wrong in the world right again. And so, to me, calling is I belong in Christ and I join with Him on His mission to make all things right or good or flourishing. And so I can express that and live that out in whatever situation I find myself in. And it gives me a direction. It gives me something beyond my past that says this is who I am. So I think it's freeing, it's life-giving, but we don't often look at that. Like we go out and we try to find our identity. We go out and try to find our purpose. And I think they've both been given to us. And I think that's what the big vision for calling us actually is.
Yeah, that's really I think significant that like you can approach calling as it is my identity, my success in it. And, maybe it's a particular role, particular job, or particular outcome that I associate with my calling, right? But what I hear you talking about is our identity in our calling is being broader than that. And then situationally, it gets expressed in a particular job, a particular community, a particular context. And so there's a freedom to approach it that way, a security in the identity of your calling that's broader than a particular job or a particular outcome. Am I hearing that right?
Yeah. I mean, another way to say it might be work is not the place you go to find your calling, it's the place you go to express it. So you're expressing who you are and that purpose that God's given you in your work, rather than saying, "Hey, I need work." You're actually hoping that work can fulfill something deep inside you. If you're looking at it the other way around, which is kind of the antithesis of the Christian message. It would actually be that there's nothing out there that can fulfill you, make you whole, complete who you're supposed to be, and whatever language you use for that. God says, I have to do that. You have a need that God does. And so if it's money, or if it's a certain kind of work, or if it's a relationship, or whatever it is, an addiction that we try to fill those things with. We're actually doing the same thing with work when we use calling in that way. And we say, "Oh, it's not my calling. I need to find the other job." It's like, well, yeah, that is also not to say like you shouldn't try to find a job that really fits you. There are going to be, and we live in a time in history and in society where there's a lot of opportunities for you to choose a job. Not everybody's in that situation. Not everybody's in that situation all of their life, but there is some opportunity to say, yeah, I want to find a job that I enjoy, that I think I could be good at, that I am suited for. That's a good thing. And it's also yes, and then you can go express the calling in that thing.
Yeah, it's really interesting to like if you come from a non-Christian perspective or something, just sort of call it philosophical materialism. I'm just doing work because I need to. And then at some point in life, actually, it's the experience and work that invites you into the bigger question. It's kind of ironic that on the other side, if you enter from a Christian perspective about the dignity and significance of work, you can get like the particular expression of that work can actually become the obstacle or that sense of calling.
Yes.
Like, I don't know what I do because I haven't had that, particular calling worked out yet. Did you listen to any of that? I think it's a podcast series that Bible Project did recently about the theme of redemption.
No, I haven't listened to that one. I have listened to some of their stuff. But I haven't listened to that one, I don't think.
I'll just, why it came to mind. It's excellent, by the way. But why it came to mind is one of the aspects of redemption, like one of the use cases and the actual significances, if you will, of the word, is to repossess. And so I think it's and to repossess like that has negative connotations in our day and age, typically, because it's like someone didn't pay their bills and things getting repossessed.
Repo.
But it literally means to retake ownership for the rightful owner. And so in that context, I could see a direct parallel to this, to the identity and the meta calling that a believer has, in the sense that if you understand your calling as no, my calling is to be a repossessor of creation for the true and rightful owner, then there's an extreme freedom in that, a liberty to say, in my current situation, in my current community, in my current context, my current job, current opportunity, I can do that. I can do that in every interaction, every situation, and I ought to, rather than sitting back and sort of being a non-participant and waiting until I go, oh, this is my particular calling, my particular identity, and I can't start doing the work of my calling until I know what that is. So I love it.
That's good. I like that. So, and not only is it your opportunity, but who else if not you? Like I think that's another way to look at it. It's like, well, yeah, I might not be in this job forever. I might not love this job, but if I have this repossession mentality and focus, I want to make this thing more right. I want to leave it more right than when I got here. And if I'm not thinking about that, who's going to do that? Hopefully there will be some other people, because also kind of gives a sense of urgency and a different angle to like wake up on Monday morning and get excited about the work we're going to go do. That's, good.
Let's lean into that a little bit, because I want to hear you talk. All right. So this is sort of the concept of calling, and touch a little bit on identity. You're talking about like this sense of like who else, or this sense of, hey, here's what I've been entrusted with right now. Here are my skills, my gifts, my desires, these things that I feel. So what significance do those aspects, sort of the deeply personal, deeply individual experiences, how do they play into this sense of calling and then also career?
Oh, I think it's a good question. And it is, we could say it's kind of more of a meta idea to think calling is my identity and purpose. And that's something that's given to me as a person, as a Christian trying to live out the faith. And that's an expressor wherever. And you're asking on the other side, then, like the particular, what does that mean then to how I choose my job and how I serve my work, or make some actual decisions about that sort of expression of my calling? And I'd say, every person is unique and uniquely made. They have unique experiences. You start thinking at different levels of these kinds of things. Like, what am I passionate about? Like, what do I think I'm good at, and what do I think like really upsets me in the world? Like, these are the things that really drive me crazy, or I'm very excited about. Start thinking about those things. You might start thinking about your own experiences, how those might lead to opportunities because of networks that you're part of and circles of relationships, or because of things that have really shaped you into who you are. Like, for example, I had like 8 internships between college and grad school. And I thought for sure, like, I'm never going to get to do the real thing. I'm always going to be this like perpetual intern, you know, or it caused self doubt. But it actually gave me the opportunity to see many different entities and how they operate and how people work together, what their wins were, what their failures were, and why. It gave me a broad scope. That that kind of, in my case, they all happen to be different churches. So I've got this thing in my background of experience that's like I had a chance to see how a lot of different churches work. So that's actually played out in my career choices the other day. Um, or you might think about your actual skills, like things that you actually have a competency in, you're adept at them, you have a talent for them, or maybe you've become good at them because you've been in the jobs that made you have to be good at them, even though you didn't like that job. You now have a skill that you might be able to use, right? So I think all those things are super important. And then thinking about your placement. And I say placement because I think we're not world where we are on accident. And so that could be, what industry or industries have I been a part of? What is my actual workplace right now? Like, where am I from? Who do I live by? What's my family? I live in a certain country in a certain time period of history. Like, all these things actually end up helping us navigate towards more practical decisions about how I want to express my calling, or how I might feel I have a unique opportunity to express that calling as opposed to other people, just because of my uniqueness or my uniqueness.
So one thing that jumps out at me there is being significant is like, I mean, you didn't use the word, but the way you're encouraging sort of considering and thinking about this and not thinking, oh, I'm in the wrong place at the wrong time or something like that is to guard against a sense of shame or misfortune or something of like, oh, I'm not in the right place. So to value all of the parts of you and your created identity, all of the parts of your story, and survey all of the actual opportunities that you have in your current situation to use all of those other parts of you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, another helpful um, framework, I think, from the Christian faith is faithfulness and fruitfulness. So, like, we got to be productive as human beings. We want to see certain things happen. And if you translate that mentality to, like, I have a certain calling, that means I'm looking to have a certain impact on the world in some way. Um, and if you're not getting that opportunity, you're frustrated. But if you put the lens on of just, let me be faithful to the work in front of me today and sort of be open handed about the fruit of that, it's pretty freeing. I work in a nonprofit. Like, we, as nonprofit leaders, are constantly thinking about how do I show people our impact? How do I demonstrate that we are a good thing that they should invest their donuts of dollars in? How does our team know that we're making the impact towards our mission that we care about? And we've sort of said, well, we think this is the fruit or the impact of our work, but what we're going to track is our faithfulness to the tasks in front of us that we laid out. So, that's a different mentality too that I think is super helpful in this full conversation about work and calling and what does it mean to steward my story well. There's a great essayist contemporary of like C.S. Lewis and Tolkien, her name's Dorothy Sayers. She has this great essay called Why Work. In it, she talks about how people have lost the imagination for doing the work for the sake of doing the work well. So a doctor is doing healthcare because they get those in paycheck and that is thing rather than the caring patient.
Hmm.
A lawyer, is going through all these huge stacks of because they get their paycheck or that's what they have to do. It's the job that they found themselves in rather than thinking, actually, I'm pursuing making things right, some sense of justice, of like serving the actual work. And I think you can translate that from a faith perspective or a non-faith perspective and just say, this is the actual role of this job I do, whether you're in, I'm sitting in a coffee shop, in a restaurant, like, well, they're providing food, we're providing a space for people to connect and to work. Like that's a good for humanity. Healthcare, through even something. Business, you're creating wealth for people. You're generating products and services that should make life better. Like serve that work. And as you serve that work, I think the fruitfulness is sometimes what you expected, and other times something totally different, but beautiful. And so you get this opportunity to just go, man, my responsibility is to be faithful to this today, and I'm going to let God worry about the outcomes, and I'm going to be happy with what those are. As long as I can go to bed and I go, and I did what I was supposed to do today. I was faithful with that list.
Man, I love that. There's a Rick Rubin. I think I might have mentioned this book to you before. The Creative Act, I think is the name of it. Anyways, he's got a great, very like liberating posture of, the way that the artist works. Like their responsibility is done when they've fully explored the subject matter, when they've produced the art. They're not responsible for the outcome, for how people react to it, for all those things. And I love that as that posture towards the effort, towards the work, as a parallel for the way that, really everybody, but a Christian in particular ought to approach the work. This is what I feel called to. This is the opportunity that I have. This is the vision that I have. And I did everything I could faithfully in that today. And that's it. So, sometimes that's going to be more successful than others, but I can rest in that work because it's not my responsibility to finish the work. The work is finished on the cross. It is my responsibility to trust and obey, and just to do what I've been called to do. There's that word again.
Yeah. Yes. We use it a lot. But I do think that's a freeing way to think of it. And, like even if you think back to COVID and you go think about all the essential work that was done, society needed people to do a good job. We needed competent workers, meeting all those needs. And I think we just need to carry that mentality of them. Like we actually depend on each other a lot. Like our economic system is built and predicated on the idea that people are going to do a good job at their job. Like we rely on that when we get on a plane. We rely on that when we get in our cars every day, that these traffic lights are actually going to work, that people are going to pay attention to the laws. Like we are so dependent on all those things actually working. And so when society starts to have this like works a necessary evil, or they take it too far and it becomes like the master of their life, neither one of those gets us to a place of where we are being faithful to the work in front of us. We are doing the best we can do. And we do that because, well, it's good for us individually. Like if you do a good job of work, you probably get rewarded eventually. You get to keep your job, you might get a raise, whatever it is. But also, people depend on it. Whatever the task is, it's serving somebody. It's a product somebody needs or using. And so I think it's an important mentality to bring to a modern day workplace. And I also think, we're asking these big questions about what does it mean to be human in this age of AI right now. And I want to say like, yeah, well, work is part of being human. Just ask the person who wants to be employed, who hasn't been employed for a year, if work is important to being human. There's a lot of research out there about how people do when they're unemployed for a long time. We need something that we're contributing. We're not just consumers. We are contributors. Of course, work is going to change with AI in some ways, but we're also being forced to ask this question: what does it mean to be human? If AI can do these tasks, what does it mean to actually be human? And I would just say, like, for sure, human beings want to work, are made to work, are healthier when they work. And so maybe there are new jobs to find or whatever, but that's just part of what it means to be human.
Yeah, it's if I connect those last 2 points, if there's a deficit of, I would use the word imagination. I mean something very particular by that, vision, or literally the image that you have in mind that you're working towards that motivates you. When work becomes purely a material exchange, a transactional effort, right? There's no amount of money that will motivate me to give it my best, give it my all, or satisfy me when I have completed it. So I don't want to dismiss money and pay, and all of those things are hugely important in the topic of work, but it is not a substitute for having an imagination behind how you lead and how you work. And so, like, the interesting part, the connection to the AI piece is like, AI does whatever it's told. Right? It's a completely, empty container really for how somebody else is using it. If we begin to treat our work that way, and us as an employee is like, I'm just a vessel doing this, doing my boss's will for this money, or in exchange for this outcome, or whatever it is, then that work is not going to be done well. I'm not going to be happy with it, no matter how much you pay, not in the sense of contentment, no matter how much I get paid. And the work product is going to break down. The alliance, the cooperation, the quality of the food at the cafe, like all of that stuff begins to break down. And I wonder if, in trying to focus so much on material productivity, we haven't lost that sense of connecting the significance of our work and the imagination of making an impact and solving a problem and having some significance behind the work that we do.
No, I think you're spot on, man. That's well said.
Do you see? So let me ask you, let's get more practical here. Just in terms of like surveying the landscape of what's going on. What we've talked about so far, primarily calling, some identity stuff, in the work that you guys do and the people with whom you work, can you just sort of survey the landscape of what are the challenges that people are expressing? What are they feeling? Is there a generational difference in, how they approach this and issues that crop up? I'm just curious, sort of, as somebody who thinks about this more or less full time, what are you seeing out there?
I think there's new things to think about when we think about what's going on in the workplace today. But there's also a lot of the old stuff that's still there. Like, people still they maybe see their job as just a job and necessary evil, and they have to do it. To people who want to spend all their time at work and they love it. And then I think uniquely today, like, I just hear all the time about artificial intelligence. Somebody just made an offhanded comment at an event we were doing, kind of on the side with some people just chatting. It's like, yeah, I'm not really sure if my company's going to value my humanity in 6 months because artificial intelligence is doing it, or they just they just see it differently. And so we've always had this struggle, I think, between like valuing humanity at work and getting humanity to be productive and actually valuing what's produced over the human being. And I think that's still a continuing struggle. It's a unique time where we have so many generations in the workplace, but their experience of the workplace is just so unique. Like, baby boomers had a totally different experience of work when they started than Z does right now. Gen X and millennials have different experiences at work. And now they're all showing up in the workplace together. So I think there's that. The other thing I see right now a lot of is talking about the gray tsunami in people's businesses they've run for 30 years, small businesses that they're either selling to private equity, shutting it down, or finding somebody else that wants to take it up. And so there's a lot of conversation about people wanting to buy a business. And that feels like a unique thing. I'm sure it's gone on, but in terms of scale, just because there are so many of those small businesses that need to turn over because of the baby boomer generation, I just think that's like kind of exciting. Um, so, what does it look like to be an entrepreneur through acquisition versus an entrepreneur right now? Like, what if you started with a bunch of employees and clients and processes and 30 years of success, and you're going to come in and try to figure out what the next stuff looks like, whether you're going to grow it, continue it, whatever. I think that's kind of compelling and cool. That's unique. Um, but I also think we still struggle with all these big questions like we always have about calling and purpose and how much time should work get out of my life, and how do I have this work-life balance, which we think is not a good way to frame that necessarily. How do I have a better imagination for my work, and how it contributes to the common good? So I think all those things are happening. A lot of them have happened all throughout human history and work, but some of them are totally unique because of all the change that's happened in the last 5 years, especially with COVID and AI. Like it's a lot of change that people are experiencing in their work.
Have so I said at the beginning, calling and career. As we've been talking, I wonder if career is even like a term or a concept. If when you're talking to the boomer who's at the end, who owns that business, if their concept of career at all resembles Gen Z's concept or connotations when they hear the word career.
Well, I think they're definitely different. Um, I did some research in my doctoral studies on quit rates in the 70s. Now, I'm not going to remember them off the top of my head right now, but it would have been boomers. Um, and their quit rate was as high or higher as Gen Z millennials have been, and even Gen X. And so it actually points to maybe that season of life, like where you're in your 20s, 30s, where you're jumping around different jobs a lot and looking for better opportunities. And so but I think there seemed to be, at least when I was in my 20s, that there was this like, oh yeah, I'll be with a company for a long time. That was that was almost part of the American dream in some or something. Like that was a idealized way of thinking about work. But it seems like everybody was sort of rebelling against that because there's all this quit rate data. It's like, yeah, people were jumping around to different kind of jobs. And so their career arc is like kind of a portfolio of things. So I would say I don't know, I don't hear a lot of people talking about career necessarily anymore. I think it is a lot of conversation around calling and about what kind of work is good and am I engaged at work or satisfied with work. But career, it feels like a thing I'm going to piece together myself over decades rather than like this one big arc that we're all kind of shooting for.
Interesting. Is that, I get the sense of like, I have no historical context for this, but now that there's this default assumption of sort of perpetual free agency. It's like, yeah, this is good for me right now, but if there's a better opportunity, I'm gone. Or if you make a change I don't like, I'm gone. And like this, at some level, that is healthy and good, both at the individual and the institutional level. But what my particular question, what I wonder, and I have no basis for you having any particular insight on this, but I'll ask it anyways. How has the institution, how has the company's posture toward the employee changed? So your data suggests that sort of people are no more, at least in their actions, no more free agents today, and they're going to opt out, take their ball, and go home than they were before. But has that behavior, that narrative, or the culture change where now the institution, the company, is less willing to invest and to commit long run to employees?
Yeah, I think that's probably accurate. I would, man, I don't know. I think the free agent mentality, I don't know. It does kind of, that's like a sports world parallel, right? Like we're seeing all of our superstars just decide, I want to go play in this place, or I want to play with these people. And sometimes I'm like, yeah, we just like sometimes we just think we can translate that to our everyday work. And realistically, that's not possible for most people. Um, Now, some people are being totally recruited right now, right? Like Meta is just going out and paying like nine figures to find the best AI talent and bring them on their team, which, wow, that's like amazing and crazy to me. Um, but most workers aren't given the chance to do that. I think, yeah,
So you're thinking of it like free agency in terms of like the superstars and the big outcomes, and basically like the Pareto principle, where which is itself fractal, right? So you have 80-20, and you have 4% and 0.8%, and et cetera. And those very, very top few, because of the impact of technology, because of the value that they can potentially bring, it's winner take all. Like that's the end of the game. I'm thinking of it more in terms of how people relate to the culture. So the free agency mindset is, I'm willing to opt out just because. So there's not a lot of commitment, a lot of loyalty on the side of the employees, is what the data
yes,
suggests. That's not always
yeah.
unwarranted. What I'm wondering is that just a new equilibrium where now the companies are like, well, since we expect that you have no commitment to us, we're not going to have a commitment to you. And there really is no career path. There really is no investment or development. And you, as an employee, you are the one who's responsible for your career development, for your career advancement, for your career anything. It actually sort of creates a transactional culture where it's like, this is a marginally better opportunity. So I'm out because I'm in it for my career, not for service, vision, commitment to the culture, like
Mm,
whatever it is. So slightly different usage in how I was using.
Ian, I don't like the vision and that you're articulating. So, yeah, I do think it's probably present. We just did some research with the Barna Group that says that 50% of workers today don't feel like they have an advocate at work, advocating for their development. And I think that you're what you're describing is symptomatic, maybe rather than like an intentional pursuit. I think we have a virtual hybrid reality where the US worker has a bit more leverage right now to say, I want to work with a lot more autonomy and flexibility. And the workplace says, okay, because we want you to stay here. It costs way more to lose somebody than training on the person. So that's still true. But you have a harder time finding an advocate if your entire team is never in person, and you don't get a chance to really build those connections. I think that could be part of it. I do think there are plenty of corporations and big organizations that just your job, you do it. If you don't want to do it, get out of here. We'll find somebody else. You're replaceable, and so then therefore you have the mentality as the worker that I'm just gonna pick and choose the best option and not be loyal. And I think loyalty is the wrong word. I think it's more about how can I be as faithful to this work as possible, and if there's a better opportunity, great. Um, I think there's so much left on the table in terms of satisfaction at work when we just decide to get out quick. Because, no pain, no gain.
Yeah. Well, there's that sort of, I mean, I see a parallel too, though, where if you have company leadership that is uh, just trying to extract maximum value, trying to, you know, optimize the balance sheet, then that lack of vision and imagination that we talked about earlier in terms of who they're serving, how they're serving, the impact that they're having, that sense of calling. So if the company doesn't have a sense of calling that's part of its culture, it's difficult to expect the employee to have to bring that themselves. And frankly, if they're behaving that way in that sort of ruthless maximization or optimization scenario, um, they're probably not going to attract the type of employee that would bring that anyways.
I totally agree. That's spot on. And I'd say that's like one of the reasons Denver Institute exists. We want leaders to have a different kind of imagination about work. If you're focused completely on profit maximization, you know, you're not definitely not in the triple bottom line kind of conversation the companies have been in recently. I think there's people who make an argument that everything is more about wealth extraction than wealth creation right now. If that's your mentality, you're certainly not going to be too preoccupied with creating a great workplace culture for your workers, because you're really just trying to get the best value out of them, which people don't actually want to work in that kind of environment. They want to be appreciated. They want to be developed. They want to feel cared for. They actually want love. That's just not a workplace word they would ever use. But long term, if you're setting out to create good services and products, and you want long term, like you're gonna treat people differently, and you're gonna get different results on it.
Fashion. I mean, love is 100% in agreement, and that's like what's underneath, right? Like even more proximate to that is, and this is a counseling term, but secure attachment, right? They want a healthy relationship with proper boundaries where they can securely show up as a full person and be treated with dignity and respect as if they were a human being.
Yes.
And that's hard to find.
Yeah. And now there's AI that's making people go, hey, are you going to treat me as a human being or not? And I think, the other part of this would be the workplace is actually being asked to be more relationally than it has been in the past, while at the same time, we are actually less proximate physically with our coworkers than we have been. Like we don't have the institutions that former generations had, like civic groups, church, clubs, whatever those things are. We spend more time looking at our screen, connecting there, whether it's in a hand or our desktop or whatever. And we're actually longing for the workplace to fulfill some of those relationships because we spend so much time with those people. And yeah, people are feeling isolated, lonely in general, and they feel that in the workplace, but the workplace is one of those places where you still show up and you work with people. So you're wanting that attachment, you're wanting that psychological safety, you're wanting that opportunity to be known, you're wanting the opportunity to know another, not just to treat them as like, we're just here kind of doing widgets together, hoping for a paycheck where we can like live real life outside of it, like severance. Severance is such a good exegesis of our current views of work. So if you haven't seen the series, it's worth checking out.
I heard you mention culture a few times. If you want to sort of treat the underlying problem and acknowledge the fact that for better or worse, work is the context in which people are looking for this attachment that they don't have, or the relationship, the being seen and known. Is culture the primary mechanism that a leader can use to create that environment, or are there particular interventions or particular things they should be thinking about?
I do think workplace culture is, yes, a key way people are experiencing that, but you got to be intentional with that. If you're the leader, you get to set the tone, and it doesn't mean that what you do equates to your culture, because it is what your whole organization actually does. That shows for the values that is your culture. Yeah, if you can set a pattern for I actually care about the people that report to me. You do ask them about their personal life. You do know their family's names. You have a sense of what they care about. You have a sense of what their challenges are outside of work. Because who wants to be asked to just leave all that stuff behind all the time? Like, it's nice. You want to feel Like, yeah. So, we've I just think if people are willing to share, let them share. They'd probably want to. And you can create a place where people feel cared for, where they feel like they have an advocate, where they know there's a purpose in what we're doing. I don't know. I guess I'm convinced investing in human beings is the best long-term play um, for business.
Yeah. I agree with that. And even with the technology, I mean, I do a lot of work with technology and I use AI extensively, but the point is to liberate people to do the human work. It's frankly more important. It moves the needle more. It's more leverage in the business. It's all the things. And nobody really likes doing the type of work that AI can reliably do right now. It's machine work. It's like, let's make the machines do the machine work and the people do the people work.
Yes.
But let me ask you this as we'll wrap up here in a minute. Does the Institute do anything particular? In particular, do you offer anything to support leaders in creating that environment, exploring, a sense of calling in their business and in their work, so that they can bring that to the culture of their business? Or is it, are there programs, is there practical things, or is it just the thought leadership?
Yeah, no, thanks for asking. I'd say one of the areas of focus we've been on the last year and a half or so is kind of what does it look like to bring what you would call redemptive or repossessive employment practices into your workplace. And so we're specifically generally talking to people who have the agency to ask those kind of questions and implement something. And so we've got some ideas that we've seen others do. We've tried to convene those people together to learn from one another. And we think one of our biggest roles is to platform people who are doing that, whether that's on our stage at an event or on our podcast or on our blogs or something like that. So we're always doing that kind of stuff. So some of the content out there on our site or on our podcast, we certainly speak to these things. And then we'll do events around this stuff and try to share that research or the content from that. But yeah, we're focused on like how do we give people the tools for that. But that's also related to what you said earlier, which is like our job is really to raise the imagination capacity for the church at work or Christians at work. We think that's a good thing for society. We think it's a good thing for church. We think it's a good thing for the individual person. We think it's a good thing for workplace culture. We think it's a good thing for all the employees of those workplaces. When that imagination capacity for what opportunities are there to make more things right, to create flourishing, that's a win for everybody. So I wouldn't point anybody to like a specific program. So we have several initiatives and content that we're creating that speak to these things.
All right. DenverInstitute.org.
DenverInstitute.org.
Rad. Thanks, buddy. It's good to talk to you.
Yeah, man.
Totally freewheeling here. But I'm sure we'll do it again. And maybe next time since we're both geographically proximate, I'll come over to the office or something. We can record in person. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Ian.
My name is Ian Crawford. I collect untimely ideas, build frameworks for living with purpose, and coach executives on redeeming leadership. For more conversations, our email newsletter, and topical collections of untimely ideas, visit our website at untimelyideas.com. Until next time, hustle less, hope more, connect more deeply.